Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast. Matthew here, bringing you another great episode. Today, we're going to talk about a lot of things coming up. As always, we have Eric in the studio, and to go ahead and pivot into our first conversation, we have this week coming in is, your leaders level group, your high net worth doctors that are, kicking butt and taking names in the industry. And I want you to just kind of talk about some of the things that they're going to expect when they come in.
Well, I think that, I think it's what we all should be focused on. You're right. I have a certain level, because I think that if you look at the market today, it segments. We've got the people up to $1 million in revenue, and very few of them, and I've said this before, will make the jump. Right? They're just going to get gobbled up. If you ever watched. And no one take disrespect for this. This is, but Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank's like, you're just a cockroach, and I don't mean any disrespect, but I'm just saying, if you're not moving quickly, you're going to get gobbled up. You won't even be around. Guys, you will not find a $600,000 practice in 5 years. It's just not going to exist. You're going to get gobbled up. So, but you do have that segment now. Now, you might have someone who's $600,000, but who is ascending and they're on their ascension. Maybe you find a little boutique practice as an outlier, but that's going to be far and few in between. But let's just use today's market. You've got that group. Then you got the people who are probably, I would say, somewhere between 1 million and 4 million. And these are the people who have started to figure it out, right? They've kind of said, okay, maybe they have 2 locations, maybe they have 1 super location, maybe they're doing, full arch cases, and they've got, high revenues from that standpoint. And then you've got maybe we'd call these maybe the super achievers, right? You can call it tower leadership super achievers.
The super achiever.
The people who have learned to go, to maybe 4 locations, 5 locations, 10 locations, 30 locations. And so when, no matter where you are on that ascension, as long as you're ascending, then we've got to look at certain things. And one of my arguments for this industry, and the accounting is, for the most part, not good. And I will stand by that 100%. 99% of accounting in this industry is garbage. It is. I'm sorry. It just is.
Yeah.
It's not even adequate. People don't know their financials. They don't know their numbers. The CPAs don't know how to convert it into a conversation. It's just
and you don't get them on a monthly basis. I mean, time and time again, I get phone calls and we ask for financials all the time, and they'll say, well, it's going to take me a while to get those. If you can't, if you've outgrown, we always say, and you always say, is, have you outgrown the sophistication of your network? By meaning, have you outgrown your CPA? Like, you need to take a long, hard look at that and say, if I can't call them and say, hey, I need my financials from last month within the next week, and they can't get that done, you're probably outgrowing your CPA at that point, because you need to be able to make decisions.
Well, and so the CPAs are one thing, but I think the consultants are going to go by the wayside too. And let me tell you what I mean by that. And by the way, this isn't, I don't want to beat up on anyone. I'm just leveling with you on this podcast. So, in this day and age, you could get a hygienist who could go create some kind of small custom program. Maybe you had some consultants who were maybe downloading some information from, Dental Intel and kind of going through some KPIs, and that was adequate, right? Maybe it was some training and those types of things, and while those things are helpful, and I think you need all those things, by the way, I think a practice needs, I think most practices will move to having that internal versus external, but I think most practices need, some of that information. I'm certainly not arguing against KPIs or training or any of those things. In fact, I'm a huge advocate for it. Mm-hmm. But I will say that the level of need, first of all, has always been there for a higher level of sophistication. But if you're going to compete with private equity, by the way, if one of the things you need to do in business is realize who your competitor is. And it used to be Jim Smith down the street that you'd see at the country club on Fridays, and it's no longer that. And by the way, I mean, to some of you it is, but it won't be for long. And so here's what so you asked me what like some of the topics. Well, we talk about a lot of topics, and I'm not gonna get into all of those during this podcast. But things like being able to quickly look at investments within a practice, because what people don't realize is internally, okay, if we make a compound effect of the same mistake year after year after year after year after year, believe it or not, without spending any more money, so no more risk, no more money inside your practice, you can literally create 400 times the return. And this is where the mistake's coming on the independent side, is no one's in the marketplace showing doctors how to get a 400 or a 4,000%. I did a calculation the other day. It was a 4,000% return. And so what happens is people make decisions and not look at that. And I'll give you an example, just a side decision. I said I did a cash flow calculation and looked at the present value of an investment into a Syric. Well, people say, well, why don't you like Syrics? I said, well, shit, it's a negative return. It's a negative return. I don't put money in places that are a negative return. Yeah, but I really like it. Look, whoever came out with the Syric, good for you. You made a bunch of money on it. I don't like them because I'm a finance and numbers guy and a business guy, and it's got a negative return. First of all, you keep the thing for 5 years. I would argue that it replaced, it just created an expense. I'm not really sure that it actually reduced any costs. You have to educate the patients on now the value of it. You got to, if you do a lot of them, you got to have now an employee to man the damn thing. And then in 5 years, it's obsolete anyhow, and you get it. So it's a depreciating asset that now all of a sudden we get a bump now for returning in our equipment and buying the same stupid thing again. Yeah. So I don't want to I sound like I'm getting.
Yeah, I think this is a crucial conversation though, because we see this every single year as we're approaching the end of the year. We have 2 months left, guys and girls that are listening. You're going to have your supply reps, you're going to have people approach you and say, all right, well, you need to buy this because otherwise you're going to be paying it in taxes anyways. And they're going to try to, and you always say the phrase of don't let the tax tail wag the dog. That's going to happen. So I think this is a crucial conversation of where do I invest money at the end of the year? Because I know you're thinking about it. I know you're listening to this right now and you're like, okay, I have to spend money on something. What do I do?
Right. And so Matthew, that's a great point. We are at the end of the year. And so you got bonehead CPAs giving boneheaded advice because they don't understand cash flow and understand that all of a sudden this doctor buys a bunch of equipment they don't need. And all of a sudden we're getting a call from him in March going, I just don't know what happened to the cash flow. Well, I'll tell you what, you bought a bunch of stupid stuff you didn't need. That's why. Yeah. But I'll get off on a tangent because it's just poor business.
I opened up a can of worms.
That's why they're not business people. They're CPAs. They're accountants. Let them do your accounting, not business advice. But if you're going to make that decision, now sometimes it's not boneheaded. Sometimes it's intelligent, right? Depending on what's coming up. And I'm not against making investments if the cash is allocated and we've allocated the cash throughout the year or throughout the months or whatever for a future investment that we knew was coming. And now all of a sudden what we do is we take that cash, let's say it's $200,000. And now we start to lay out, and this is what I'll do with one of the exercises. We'll do 2 days worth of exercises. But one of the things, we'll do a case study and we'll lay out, like for instance, 3 different investments. And we'll talk about how do you know what the true rate of return is. And by the way, when you can do that quickly, that is how you compete with corporate dentistry. But and hell with corporate dentistry, forget them for a minute. Let's just say compete against yourself. I mean, if you're trying to turn this into a cash position, literally, I'm telling you, I put two investments in. One last week had a 4,000% return, and the other had a 12% return. Hey, 12% is not bad, but if you can get 4,000, then I go that route. And so you're not spending any more money and you're not creating any more risk. That's the interesting part, is can you grow your practice and make a lot more money without creating more risk? Because the risk is the concern, right? And the answer is, well, of course you could, but you would have to be able to learn how to analyze that.
Yeah. And I think it's oftentimes the funny part is when we get into this situation, what I've noticed and what, you've noticed in the conversations I've had with our advisory department is the clientele you're talking about is generally sitting on a lump sum. Yeah. They're sitting on a lump sum. They have cash in the bank. They just don't know where to put it next.
Sure.
And I think the issue is they don't know what the return is, because we see it all the time is if a bad investment will cost them growth. It will cost them in the long run. It'll cost them in the short term where they won't have the capital because they just invested in something that doesn't get the return right away. And ultimately speaking, that's the biggest hump is when someone brings their financials to us, we see, all right, we have this loan, we have this loan, we have this loan, we have this investment. And they don't know how to calculate what the ROI is on that. If I bet you 9 times out of 10, you can have a conversation with a doctor and you can say, all right, you bought this. What's the return been on this single item the past 6 months? And they won't, 99% of the time, they won't know the answer.
And you have to learn, you have to know how to discount future cash flows. And so discounting future cash flows, first of all, when I said discounting future cash flows, I just lost like 70% of the audience, right? Everybody just was like, I don't know what the hell he's talking about. So, but when you've got to know how to discount future cash flows and know what discount rate to use and understand what that actually looks like and actually forecast that. So if you don't have a method to do that, if you don't have someone advising you, this is what I'm trying to say is that consulting, people like us, you see it, Matthew. The average, plexus are coming to us every day that are, that are very large. And if you look at the Tower Leadership, our average client who's coming in is multi-location, is, large, is moving, and, we're blessed to have such amazing doctors to work with. But I think one of the reasons I always say you attract what you become, I believe we attract those people because there's a level of sophistication and advice they can't get anywhere else because everyone else is focusing on numbers that are important, by the way, but they're not as important as understanding how to get a 4,000% return. You got someone focused on how you can shave off a percentage in your overall team expense. But not focus on the 4,000% that you can go get somewhere else. Hell, I'd rather focus on the 4,000%, make a whole lot of money with the same risk, make a whole lot more money, and be more better off. And that's the challenge. And being able to look through case studies. One of the things I'll walk the doctors through is case studies, and dropping them in case studies, almost like if we were an MBA. Dropping through case studies so that they can analyze and kind of think through the process, and then analyzing practices and really looking at practices. Look, what happens to our clients is that not only are they finding one, it's not that they find one office, they always find like 3 simultaneously. It's like somebody will call me up and they'll be like, I can't find a practice for sale. And then like a week later, they'll call me up and they're like, I found 5. Yeah, it's like I found 5 of them, analyze them all. Well, how do you do that? It's certainly not appraisal value. That certainly has nothing to do with anything because you have to be able to understand future cash flows and be able to lay those 2 investments out and say, look, yes, there's qualitative factors, and we definitely want to know the qualitative factors because, by the way, those qualitative factors can get you in big trouble if you don't know what you're doing. Yeah. And the second part is, because, by the way, a lot of people have bought practices and those practices have struggled, went under, not done well, because so there's a right way and there's a wrong way. I think a lot of people acquire practices because of an ego and not really understanding the way to do it right. Then the other part is actually looking at the cash flows and the future cash flows and anticipating future cash flows. But there's a level of sophistication on top of that. Not just what we do with the future cash flows, but think about this for a moment. If, let's just say, one practice cash flows an extra $20,000 a month, or 10, hell, and we know then where to put that money and get 4,000% return, then what ends up happening is how quickly can you capitalize and how quickly can you get out of that practice or pay off that practice and move to the next one? Well, if you understand capitalization and you understand how to make money work like that, then you're thinking on a whole nother level, right? We call this like a whole nother trajectory. And that's where we're so far above. If I lined up, 2,000 consultants, they would be confused with what I'm talking about right now. And so, like I said, I'm not trying to beat anybody up, but by all means, like I said, I think that there's a lot of strength and a lot of that other stuff too. But but it's lower level, if that makes sense, right?
And I think it's, the concept you've talked about on this podcast that you speak to our clients about is this idea of an organizational ceiling. Most consultants, and I was just doing some thinking as you were speaking, when I have conversations, so when someone calls in tower leadership, a lot of the times they're over 1.5 in that $2 million range, and they've had consultants in the past, and it just seems like they're only showing them how to get to that mark.
That's right.
No one's showing them how to get past that. And you can see it when you do consulting. You'll have the people that come in and make sure the team's happy, make sure like your systems are in place, you're using dental intel, like you're using all these things, but that's only going to get you so far.
That's right, sure.
And that's when people, they're frustrated. They see a frustration and they say, I heard this, what I've heard from you guys is completely different in the marketplace, and I feel like you bring the sophistication. And I think that's truly what it is. If you're at that point, we're going to show you how to get past that hump. I've seen it time and time again. And I think that's the key is, what investments do I need to make? Because when you get to that, you need more knowledge. You need, all right, where do I put this money now? My systems are great. Everything's good with my practice right now. I just can't get over this hump.
So I took I went in my phone. I found a quote as you're talking. Here's the quote: "Great execution won't get you anywhere if your strategy's wrong." It's powerful because I think that so much is focused on tactics. But first of all, the tactics are lower level tactics, right? So the tactics aren't right even then because they don't take into account all the data points. And so you have limited data points in what you're being consulted on. And the other part of that is, if you don't have an overwhelming strategy, right? If we're just moving to move, then great execution of a poor strategy, right, doesn't get you anywhere. We see that all the time. We see it, and how, I don't want to get political, but we've seen in political areas where, great execution won't get you anywhere if the strategy's wrong, and you guys can infer and think through whatever you want to on that statement. But it serves a point, which is to say, look, you have to have the right strategy and understand why that's the right strategy. It's not just creating a strategy. You have to understand why that's the correct strategy, and how does that strategy help you hit your end goal and your game. And if we're just focused on execution of tactics, well, execution of tactics is great unless the strategy's wrong. And so then you start to say, well, then Eric, how do you get someone who's frustrated to get above that level? Well, it's because we're having a different strategy. If you're hanging out with people that are consulting for practices are up to 1.4, that's the limited knowledge. They have an organizational ceiling themselves. They don't know how to coach up that higher client, and that's fine. There's a lot of fish down there for them to take care of, but it need to be taken care of, by the way. But once you get over a certain level, you got to have a different level of conversation, right? Phone training is great, but phone training is not going to get you to 10 locations, right? I mean, it's just not. It's being able to have a great experience is important. However, a great experience isn't going to get you over the $10 million hump. So it's not going to free up. I always like to, and more, the more stories that, we've been working together for a long time, and it feels like every week someone, when we have our team meetings or whatnot, they say, I freed up $10,000 in this person's cash flow per month. It's, the execution didn't get them there. It's the strategy. It's, how did we do that? And it's so crazy to me that there's certain things that practices are doing, and they think they're doing, all these things right. And yet we look at everything and we say, all right, well, we're missing this big area, and it frees up this much cash flow. And I hear those stories time and time again. It's because of that. They were getting these tactics to do everything. They thought they were doing everything right, but they had the wrong strategy. Well, and I will say one side note to give consultants a little credit here. Okay. I gotta jump it. Like, this is my, so
your PSA,
my PSA, right? Look, there are a lot of consultant hoppers out there as well. Okay. If you've been through 5 consultants and you still haven't cracked the $1 million mark, it might be you. Right. so just a hit. Right. Okay. It's like, I've been through 5 personal trainers and I'm still 100 pounds overweight. Put the donut down. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like there is a level to where it's like, it might be you. Okay. So it's well, look, you can get something from everybody. So, it's like there is, to give some people some credit, hey, look, we're at Tower Leadership. One of the things like red flags is when someone's like, yeah, I've worked with this company and that company and this company. And we're like, okay, so why are you here? And if the answer is because I know you can get to the next level, we've hit an organizational ceiling. We know with our certain level of sophistication in our consulting, we can only get so high. That's a great conversation. I'm good with that. But if it's the, nobody works, nothing works, I'm like, well, okay, well, it could be you. Okay. It just might. And 9 times out of 10, it is. So I'm just giving a little bit of credit, because there would be people listening to this that go, yeah, my consultant stinks. And I'm like, hold on. Okay. Well, okay.
I mean, oftentimes we tell clients that you should have multiple. Like you should have multiple advisors that you're asking, and some of our high level clients, they have us, they have a great financial advisor, they have a great CPA, they have other advisors.
Yeah, sure.
They're bouncing ideas off of people, and then they're coming to a meeting and saying, all right, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. I mean, I was just in an email yesterday with a great CPA and a client who's, moved dramatically since we started working with them. I mean, good gosh, amazing growth. And the tax CPA is weighing on what he should, which is the tax side of things. I'm weighing on the business side of things, and we're all included together. And so we're working to create a united strategy. I think you got to have, that, but you got to also look and say, do I have the sophistication of the advisors that's correct? Go back to a question you asked me is that, what do I do with the high net worth individuals? And look, it's a different level of conversation, and you have to pay for a different level of conversation, to be fair too. I think the other side of this is people want it to always be cheap. And I think people got to get the hell out of that mindset. I think that when you get to a certain level, you have to stop worrying about it being cheap, and you got to start focusing on the rate of return. You get what you pay for. So, I mean, look, time is valuable. If I can make somebody $5 million in 20 minutes, well, then that 20 minutes is very valuable, right? And so you might, so I do think that we also have to figure out, like, look, you have to invest in you have to invest in advisors, you have to invest in, that's just part of the business. Like, it is part of business. When I sit down with this group next week and we have these level conversations, well, those conversations are going to make them, over time, tens of millions of dollars. So, when you go back to it, you go, well, how, and in fact, Harvard did a study on this. I saw this a few years back. I've probably talked about it on this podcast, which is, it's abundance mindset versus scarcity, right? Scarcity says, well, I can only afford this much. Abundance says, well, there's unlimited amount as long as ROI is there. And so I think that's the difference. And the group that's coming next week is going to be, they're there because they've been qualified by me, and they have passed certain stringent tests to be there. Not physical tests, but kind of some other types of tests, and have proven that they'll put in the work. And so that, those are the people that are the most fun to work with. It's just like spending time with a patient who doesn't want to do actually the procedure you told them. Well, the same thing for me. I want to work with people who actually want to get the job done.
Yeah, and I think the key is just developing your sophistication. I think figuring out how you can become more sophisticated, whether that's looking at your internal process or looking at outside sources such as Tower Leadership or your other advisors to figure that out. But I think this is another great podcast. I think, there's a lot of great concepts.
Where are we at in time with this thing? Where are we at? 40 minutes in?
Yeah, 40 minutes in. So it's a dandy.
What's the sum of this? Yeah. So what's the summary? Give me a great summary, Matthew. What's a great summary? Here we go.
The summary is when, first off, because I'm going to get this question when people call in, it's the end of the year. Don't let the tax tail wag the dog. If you have an investment coming up, know what it is, or reach out to an advisor to figure out what's the best solution for your practice. Number 2, develop your sophistication. Look at your organization as a whole right now. Are you stuck at 2 million and you've been stuck there for the past 3 years and you've used these different advisors? If you're still stuck, you probably need a new advisor. You probably need to look at something that can help you break that ceiling. And number 3, when you look at your practice as a whole, where do you want to go? I think ultimately we always say this in the podcast is figure out where you want to go. Where do you want to take it? You always say grow to grow is just an ego trip. Where's this going to take?
Yeah, that's where strategy comes in, is that growing to grow is an ego trip. Strategy is where you actually change up and I think that there's lack of strategy. I also understand you have to, at this point in this game, be able to look at 2 investments within a practice and financially calculate, not guess, calculate. Someone told me the other day a dentist's pro forma is what's on the back of a napkin. Okay, well, look, okay, at some point we got to move the needle on that. Okay, so how do you calculate between two practices and future cash flows and seeing what that looks like? How do you figure out between two investments which one makes the next move makes sense? Because look, if one has immediate return, one has a longer return, one has a higher percentage of rate of return, the other has a shorter percent, and we start looking at them and go, well, if I put 40,000 here, it'll have this return in this period of time. I'll take that 20,000 of that, I'll put it over here, and understanding how that domino effect works out is what makes you considerably wealthy without increasing risk.
Yep. Develop your strategy, people. Develop your strategy.
Develop your strategy.
This is Halloween weekend, so guys, go have some fun. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube, like the podcast.
Yeah, I've got my fall gear on. I mean, I was
like, if you want to see a dapper outfit, watch us on YouTube. Eric's looking sharp today, looking very fall festive. So please subscribe, also share with a friend. We always say this, Eric points this out over and over again, and there's time and time again, I get doctors that call in and say, yeah, this person shared the podcast with me. I love what you guys are talking about. What do I need to do to get involved? We do this podcast to go help people that are in this position where they need this sophistication. They don't know where else to turn. They need to develop this high level strategy. So subscribe, and always tune in next week. So thanks for joining us.